Chad Daybell, Mental Health and Personality Factors. So in this episode, I'm going to explain why I believe that Chad Daybell is extremely dangerous. But I also want to say before I get started that he's a lot harder to analyze and read than Lori Vallow because he's a covert. When I first started doing the podcasts, I had mistaken Jason Mao for Chad, but now I'm fully aware that a lot of people were drawn into this cult and it can be confusing trying to keep track of everyone. Another thing I need to mention is that this is one of the worst cases of codependency that I've ever seen between two people, which means that Chad's relationship with Lori was extremely destructive, not just for both of them, but also for the people around them. There are so many victims. You have two people with huge egos, the need to please, to be desired and wanted. One enabled the other's bad behaviors and sinister intentions and vice versa. You have a vicious cycle permeated by greed, extreme selfishness, grandiosity, and money being the root of all evil in this case. This case is baffling in many ways because so many things just don't make sense. Why did so many people have to perish just so they could be together? They could have been together like lots of couples who get married who already have children from previous relationships. Why did Tylee and JJ have to be sacrificed if, according to them, the world was going to end in July? One thing I've observed about Chad is that he's very stoic. He has a blank stare and his public demeanor is very reserved. It's important to give Chad a backstory and context. And the truth is, he seems to have a very stable background, unlike Lori, who married 5 times and moved around a lot. Chad Daybell had been married to one woman for many years, and it was a very fruitful marriage. The irony here is that Lori has been married 5 times, and Chad has had 5 children with one woman. So it appears, at least on the surface, that Chad comes from a very stable background. Whether or not he had affairs or children with other women, I can only speculate. But in terms of his decades-long marriage, it's definitely in contrast to Lori's unstable background. Unlike Lori, I don't think he has any form of mental illness or disturbance. I think he's highly deceitful and sociopathic. I think that he's a man who was looking for someone to feed his ego. I don't believe his wife was feeding his ego, and I think he found the narcissistic fuel that he desired in Lori. I think Lori gave him the praise and the flattery that he was seeking, with her being attractive, vivacious, and flirtatious, and seeming to buy into his false prophecies. That could have been enough of an incentive for him to ditch the wife. But then when you add the prospect of a life insurance payout, then getting rid of Tammy Daybell gives Chad an even greater motive. Tammy Daybell was the girl next door. She wasn't glamorous, she wasn't flashy, she was earthy, wholesome, and stable. And she was good enough for his image for the years that they were married. But for someone with that kind of ego, meeting a vivacious and attractive new woman like Lori, who shared the same beliefs, would have given him a sense of influential power and a feeling of invincibility. Regardless of what the autopsy concludes or finds, even if the conclusion is natural causes, I am 100% certain that Tammy Daybell was murdered. Wedding bands were purchased on Amazon some 17 days before Tammy Daybell died, so her passing was no accident or coincidence. Her demise was planned. I don't think Chad was making a substantial income with his writing and his books, and the type of novels that he wrote would not have been commercially appealing or viable. But I think he fancied himself as a visionary and as a prophet, and I think Lori was willing and able to feed his grandiosity. So now I'm going to list some of the significant factors that come into contention here. Number 1, idealization. Chad idealized a new life with Lori Vallow. With his wife gone, he would obtain enough money needed to start a new life and an exciting life, free of financial restraints and or limitations, increasing his power and influence over others, because money ultimately gives you power. The idealization phase had ended with Tammy Daybell a long time ago, and that relationship, in his eyes, had expired, and Tammy was no longer of use to him and could no longer feed his overweening ego. The next point I want to make, the next factor, is manipulation. I think he used religion to gain power, influence, and control over others. This was a key aspect of his false and fake facade, but I'm not quite sure how much he actually believed his own lies. And that's on to my next point, pathological lying. This is very common when it comes to sociopaths, although lying in itself does not make someone a sociopath. It's instead looking at all the factors and circumstances combined. My next point is seeking admiration. I think Chad wanted admiration from Lori, which he got, and he wanted people to be interested and impressed in his writings and his books. I think he wanted people to see him as a visionary, but in actual fact, he was just a fraud and a con artist, and that's the truth. The other point to make about Chad Daybell is that he has no morals whatsoever. What ultimately makes Chad Daybell a very dangerous sociopath is that he doesn't adhere to social norms or laws. Neither does he have any morals, and he's willing to do whatever it takes to achieve gratification. Because he appears to be very normal on the surface, he doesn't seem to have a criminal record. He was a well-respected family man. He's clean cut. He's articulate on paper. There is no red flags until you start to dig beneath the surface. So Chad Daybell is an extremely dangerous person who looks like a normal person on the surface.